Hey y'all, welcome to or welcome back to my channel, Scotty Cherie Reads. Today is the video everyone waits for all year, and I'm going to be ranking all of my fiction reads from my worst read to my absolute favorite. I am going to link my last video, which I did the exact same thing with my nonfiction reads. I had about 12 of those. I did the same thing, ranked them from worst to best if you're interested. But yeah, you're here for the fiction. I have 45 books that I'm gonna run through pretty quickly. I'm not gonna keep you guys here all day. I'm gonna give a quick couple sentence summary and just some keywords and key thoughts about how I felt about each book. And yeah, we're gonna start from 45 and go all the way up to 1. So this might be a little bit of a longer video, so grab a drink as I always say, and let's get right into it. Okay, but first, I do want to say that I only have 45 books listed here because I didn't include the Wayward Children series, which I'm working my way through right now. That video should be out on Sunday, so look out for that one. And I didn't include a couple of short stories. I read The Fall of the House of Usher in order to read a retelling this year, but I didn't throw that in here. So I'm sure when you see my stats video that's gonna come out a little bit later, there's gonna be a lot more books on here. Right now I'm sitting at about 70 books all told for fiction and nonfiction, just so you have an idea of how many books I've read this year. But yeah, so 45 books are gonna be on this list, and we're gonna start with basically the worst books, you could put it that way. Books I don't recommend and that's gonna be from 45 to 40. So let's get started with those worst books. And for starters, at the bottom of the list at 45, I'm kind of sad to say that it is Solitaire by Alice Oseman. So this is Alice Oseman's debut, and basically I want to say it's their debut. I think they were pretty young, maybe even in high school when they wrote this book, but it just was awful. I feel like I should have DNF'd it. The writing was terrible. I read all of the Heartstopper series, which you'll see where that's ranked in this video, and absolutely loved it. And I got all of the other connected stories like Solitaire, Loveless, all of those ones, but I read this and I was like, ooh, maybe I won't read them. So just a quick summary. This is about Tori Spring, which is Charlie's older sister, and the thing that she deals with when she's in high school, a coming of age story. There's a relationship with her partner Michael and her just navigating through those things, and yeah, just was not good. I think that you could totally skip this one. Definitely read Heartstopper, we'll talk about that later, but this was not worth it. Coming in at 44, we have Murder Road by Simone St. James. I hated this book. I'm sorry, this is my first Simone St. James, and I don't think I'll be picking up anything else by them. Basically, the premise of this is that there's a newlywed couple that is going on a honeymoon, and they're leaving in the dead of night, and they take a wrong turn, and they see this very injured woman on the side of the road that's hitchhiking. They pick her up, they take her to the hospital, and ultimately she dies when they're in the hospital, and obviously the cops think that they're the murder suspect, and they're under intense questioning, and then the story kind of goes from there, where we're starting to kind of understand what's going on with the murder, what's happening. There's been other murders on the same road, but yeah, the premise sounds really cool, but the execution was absolutely awful. The story didn't make any sense. Even when you got to the end, there were a lot of questions left unanswered. There was a paranormal element of this book that I wasn't expecting, and that just made things kind of wonky. It was just poor writing overall. I'm gonna leave Katie Coulson's rant video because she felt the same way that I did about this book below, and she does a great job of explaining exactly what happens in that book and why it seems so ridiculous. So check that out if you're interested. I'm gonna move on to the next one. At number 43, unfortunately, I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. So this is Stephen Graham Jones's very unique take on a traditional small town slasher story. And I don't know if slashers just aren't for me, but I did not enjoy this, and I was really sad because this is my first Stephen Graham Jones novel. I have read a couple of novellas. There's actually one that's in this list that's listed a little bit higher that I really liked. So I thought that I was really gonna enjoy this, but unfortunately it's clearly at the bottom of my list. I think I gave it 1.5 or 2 stars. I wanted to DNF this. The only positive thing about this book is that I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook narrator does a fantastic job, so that's what kept me engrossed to finish this whole book. The ending was okay. I'm glad that I finished it ultimately, but this just wasn't for me. I feel like this is gonna be a very polarizing book. Either you really, really like it or you really don't. So I just happen to fall on the side that I just don't really care for it. So unfortunately, this is at the bottom of my list. At 42, I have one of my biggest disappointments of the whole year, and that is Sorrowland by River Solomon. So this book is about the main character named Vern, who is a young woman, and she ends up fleeing this religious compound that she was born and raised on, but she's 7 months pregnant and she already has a set of twins. But she leaves, and basically her only choice is to survive in the woods, which is what she does. And that was an interesting premise, but then eventually she's forced out of the woods and has to deal with things from her past and what the future looks like for her and her little family outside of the woods. It sounded awesome, and I read this, which I'll have linked. I have a River Solomon taste test vlog that I read. This, Model Home, and The Deep. Spoiler, the other two are much higher on this list, but this just didn't do it for me. I think this was just too long. The writing was great. Like, I have a lot of tabs here, but the plot just was way too slow. The plot was way too slow. I think that overall it could have been a really, really cool story, but it just felt insanely flat for me. So unfortunately, this is at the bottom, kind of in my worst books of the year. Coming in at 41, I have Brother by Anya Allborn. And I think the problem with this book is that it was like insanely overhyped to me. People say this is like the craziest horror story they've ever read. So I went into it with like really high expectations and it just fell flat to me. Basically, this story is about a family of cannibals that lives in the Appalachian Mountains. They're secluded and they talk about the secrets and family history secrets and things like that in this book. So obviously with this premise, it's either going to be for you or it's not. You're going to gravitate towards it like me because I'm wild, or you're going to run away from it completely and you don't want anything to do with it. And I think that the premise was cool, but the story was just very predictable. The writing was insanely elementary. I finished it. I could guess a lot of the twists that were happening. At the end, one thing that really bothers me is when like the villain has this whole monologue about why they did everything they did and how, and that can just feel just very juvenile, and that happened in this book. So yeah, I just don't think it's worth it. I think that there are probably other books out there that take on this cannibalism like theme in horror books that does it way better than this one. So I say pass on this. I know that's kind of unpopular opinion. Don't hate me, just my opinion. Okay, and the last one to wrap up this section of like my worst books that I like don't recommend is at number 40. It's called You're Breaking My Heart. I don't remember the name of the author, but the book will be here, and honestly I don't remember much about this book at all. I mean, granted, I read it at the beginning of the year, but it just didn't really stick with me. I had to go back to my review to remember what it was even about. So what I vaguely remember is that there's a main character named Harriet who's a young girl, and her brother passes away, and she blames herself because that morning that he passed away, they like had a fight, and she basically said like, I wish that you were dead, and then later that day he does end up dying, and she meets this friend and they go on this like magical journey, and that's really all that I know. I don't really remember it. I don't think it was meant for me. I mean, it's a young adult book, I think, maybe even middle grade. I'll list it here what it is. I'm not sure if it's middle grade or young adult, but it was speculative. It had magical realism, and I'm still kind of dabbling in that for adult and young adult, and it just didn't do it for me. Overall, I think it was just too young of a read, and it wasn't memorable, so I just wouldn't recommend it. All right, now we're moving on to the next category, which is going to be numbers 39 to 30. And these are books that were fine enough reads, and I know that other people really like them, but they just didn't do it for me specifically. I feel like these books are probably like 3.5 star reads for me, and yeah, that's where we're at. So I'm gonna get started with probably one of the most controversial books that I have on here, and that is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. Everyone and their mother loves this book, but it really just did not hit for me. I thought it was kind of problematic. I didn't feel like it was a romance at all. Like, yeah, anyway, let's just go into a quick summary of what this is if you don't know. Basically, there are two main characters, Eva and Shane, and they're both authors, and they had this fling in high school that ended pretty abruptly and in a really bad way, and they haven't seen each other for years. And then at an author event, they see each other, and they realize that they've both been kind of talking about each other subliminally through their characters in their novels. And they kind of reconnect, and it's basically about if this can be like a second chance romance, if they can rekindle their friendship and get over what happened in the past. I just basically had problems with their relationship. I just don't think that they were really meant to be together, and if you feel that way, then like the romance just isn't gonna hit for you like everyone else. So that's just my opinion. I'll leave a video linked above that goes into a little bit more detail about it, but I'm gonna just leave it at that. But that's at number 39 for me. Coming in at number 38, I have Lakewood by Megan Giddings. So this story, I don't want to give too much away because it is kind of interesting and it does work for some people. It just didn't fully work for me. And the way someone pitched it to me was if Jordan Peele wrote a horror book about the story of the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks. And that sounds really interesting. So it's all about like bodily experimentation, and it talks about like race and class and capitalism and all the things that sounds really intriguing, but unfortunately for me, it just felt pretty flat. I don't think it was a bad book. I just think that the pacing, there were issues with the pacing. I think it wrapped up too quickly and that it could have gone deeper. And some of these themes of like capitalism, like race and identity with these experimentations, it just could have hit harder. So not a bad read, just I thought it was gonna be like one of my favorites of the year, and it definitely wasn't. It was just okay. But please let me know if you have any other books that talk about kind of this human experimentation stuff, kind of like the Tuskegee experiments. I'm really interested in that. So if you have any good nonfiction or fiction recs, leave them in the comments below. At number 37, I have Someday Maybe. Again, I don't remember the author's name, but it's listed here. I actually got rid of this book a while ago because it was just okay. These are just kind of like okay reads for me. Basically, the premise is that a wife finds her husband dead on New Year's Eve and he, you know, committed suicide, which it's all about grief and her grappling with this horrific situation that she just walked into, and that's one of my biggest fucking fears, to be honest. And I don't know, you can tell that this is the author's debut novel. Like, it wasn't awful, but you could definitely tell by the writing that it was her first book. So I might pick up something by this author again. It just wasn't as profound as I wanted it to be. I don't even know if I cried. Maybe I cried like once, but it just didn't hit in the feels with the topic that's so heavy like I thought it was going to. So it was just kind of a meh read. And another thing is that I understand that people grapple with like grief in different ways, but the way the main character dealt with grief and how she was so whiny, I just could not. So that really threw me off, and yeah, it just wasn't for me. If you're interested, pick it up, but like just it didn't hit for me at all. All right, for 36, I have The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum. So this book basically is a mystery about a Black classical violinist who goes on this journey because he has this family heirloom violin that goes missing. And basically he's trying to get this violin back. We're learning a bit about the history of this family heirloom, and it's pretty interesting. I just have it at this spot because it wasn't super memorable. It was just an okay mystery. It was fine while I was reading it, but it's not anything that's gonna stick with me for a long time. However, if you're gonna read it, the audiobook is fantastic. I think that I probably would have put it down and wouldn't have been as invested and gotten through it as fast if it wasn't for the audiobook, so definitely pick that up. There's music in it and stuff. It's really, really good. I also really like the fact that it's a Black main character who's a classical musician, which you never really see in books before. I think this is the first time that I've read about it, which was really cool to see a little bit of representation. It wasn't all about trauma necessarily. There were some traumatic events in there, but I don't know. I think that was a cool, different perspective for a Black person in books. You just don't see that very often, but yeah, it was just okay. At number 35, I have The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and unfortunately this one just wasn't for me. I was taking a chance with this in general because I'm just not a poetry fan for the most part, and especially not like YA poetry, which this book is. So it's a YA novel told in verse about our main character, Ziamara, who is an Afro-Latino woman. It's a coming of age story for her. She was raised heavily in the church and she's kind of questioning the rigid structure about the church, and she meets a boy, interest she has with a boy, and starts to have the natural feelings and, you know, sexual tendencies when this boy's around, and she's just trying to figure out if that's natural and normal, and like, or if she should feel like she's sinning with these things. And she discovers her love of poetry in this book and eventually does some stand-up or spoken word, and yeah, that's pretty much the premise of this book. It just was okay. I mean, the audiobook was really great. I'm really glad that I listened to the audiobook because Elizabeth Acevedo reads it herself, and I think that the cadence is important to hear when reading this poetry book. But yeah, it was just okay. Just average, not really my thing, but if that sounds interesting to you, go for it. At number 4, I have a modern classic, which is The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. Sorry, I had to look down here really quickly, but it was okay. I mean, I keep saying that with this group, but it was. I mean, it's a story, it's told in a series of vignettes about a young Latinx woman that lives in Chicago, what her life is like on the day-to-day. It just wasn't memorable for me. It was fine. I think it read a little young. There were some cool talking points, but because it's told in vignettes, they just didn't really hit or stick, so it just kind of fell flat for me. Yeah, like I don't really remember much. I did like the setting in Chicago because I love Chicago, but other than that, it was okay. Glad that I read it because I know that a lot of people read this in high school, but it was just for me. At 33, I have Nightcrawling by Layla Motley. This is another big disappointing read of the year. Obviously, it's here kind of in the middle towards the bottom, but it's a story about a young woman who is basically forced to get into the sex work scene in order to take care of her family. And ultimately, she gets involved with this investigation that happens in Oakland with the police department, and it takes you down a journey with that. And this had so much potential and it was really good, but I think that what she needed to do was make the book longer because some things just didn't have enough time on page and it just kind of fell a little flat, I think. I also really didn't like the ending of this book because there's kind of this like white savior trope that happens that really pissed me off, to be honest. So that knocked some stars off of this book. Another thing is that I'm looking for other books that have representation about sex work, and I haven't found a lot. So if you know any fiction or nonfiction books that focus on that theme, then please leave them in the comments below because I am on the hunt for them. Coming in at 32, I have Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. And this is a story that is a multi-generational story that's told between two different timelines. In one timeline, you have siblings. I believe they're twins. I think they're twins, but if not, they're related. They're siblings, Brian and Benny, and they are told that their mother has passed away and they need to get together to see her will. However, her will is completely told in voice recordings, and they have to sit down and listen to these voice recordings, and at the end there is a black cake in the fridge that the mom wants them to open together. So there's mysteries with that whole thing, and we're kind of discovering with them what's going on with these voice recordings in the history of their mother, Eleanor. The other timeline is Eleanor's story of her growing up and a bunch of secrets that she's kept from the family, and these two things converge, and it was pretty good. I think that this book was done well. I think that they wrapped a lot of topics into this book, and there were a lot of traumatic and like big climactic moments, but there wasn't enough time on page to really dive into each one individually, if that makes sense. Like, it would just be traumatic event, traumatic event, traumatic event, and I'm just like, okay, yo, that's not really believable, one, and two, I'm just kind of a little bit exhausted. It was engaging, it was a page turner, it was a quick read. I say that it's worth reading, but honestly, I watched the TV adaptation, and I think that the TV show did it better. So we'll leave it at that. That's Black Cake. At number 32, I have Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Wong. This is a story about a young Asian American woman who is a classical piano player, and that's like her dream, but unfortunately she has to give up that dream because her parents were in a terrible, unfortunate accident, and she has to make money to take care of them, and that world is not going to pay the bills. So she gets a job at this place called Holistic, which is a really fancy, high-end, like, health and wellness store. And weird shit starts to happen at that store. Like, they give her like these vitamins to take, and she notices changes, and it just kind of gets weird from there. Sounds really cool, but I think that the book needed to be longer. That's a classic thing for this section. I think that there just needed to be a little bit more time in the book to deal with all the topics and themes like consumerism, self-identity, race issues, self-worth. All of those things were touched on in this book, but it's fairly short and it just didn't hit like I thought it was gonna hit. Yeah, this one was a pretty big disappointment for me because I thought it was gonna be one of my favorite books of the year, but it just averaged out to be like a 3.5 star read for me. Okay, and rounding out this little chunk at number 30 is a little controversial, and unfortunately it is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. Don't come for me. This is my first Butler, and it was just okay. I'm glad that I read it, and I had a really cool experience reading this book because it actually takes place on the day that I read it, which was July 20th, 2024. That's where it starts, and I read the whole book in that day, which was really cool. It's basically a story about the future where the world is like really fucked up, and our main character, Lauren, goes basically on this journey for hopefully a better life somewhere else in America. That's all I really want to say. I feel like you should go into it blind, and that's all you really need to know. But I honestly think that the pacing was just off. I mean, she starts in this like little commune or whatever, and we're learning about her and like her family and kind of what happens. But I thought it was going to be more of a journey of her getting out, but that doesn't even happen until over like halfway through the book. However, this is supposed to be a trilogy, I believe, and Octavia Butler actually passed away before finishing it. So there is a second book that's out, but the third one didn't ultimately come out. Sorry, recycling is out here. Okay, now we're back. Yeah, the pacing issues were a problem for me, and I also didn't like the religious aspect of this book because Lauren kind of like starts her own like religion kinda, but like Lauren's 15, and some of the things that she was saying just seemed a little far-fetched and just kind of unbelievable. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to continue with the second book, and especially because if it's not finished, I feel like it's just going to be a disappointment. I'm glad that I read it, but it just was okay. All right, coming into the next section, we have books 29 through 20, which are all great reads. I think these are great reads. I would recommend them. This year, I read a lot of like 4 to 5 star reads, and these are the books that just didn't quite make it that high, but I really, really enjoyed them. So definitely pay attention to these books and pick them up if you like them because I had a great time with them. So jumping in, we're gonna start at number 29, which is Magnolia Wu Unfolds It All by Chanel Miller. And this is a super cute middle grade graphic novel that tells the story of our main character Magnolia Wu. I had to look down, I'm so dumb, but our main character Magnolia Wu, who's 10 years old, and she moved to New York City with her parents. I believe they're Asian Americans. I'm not sure if it's Korean, I can't really remember. I'll put it down here, but they're new to New York City and the parents own a laundromat, and Magnolia meets a new friend, and their little adventure that they do is they find lost socks and they try to take them to find their owners throughout New York City, and it talks about their cute little journeys with trying to find the owners in this large city. So that sounds really whimsical and stuff, but it was so cute. Like, I really like this book. book. I read it a couple of times. I need to buy it because I got it from the library. But yeah, I just decided to pick it up because Chanel Miller wrote Know My Name, which is one of my favorite books of all time. If you haven't read it, pick it up. And she did great with this as well. She illustrates the book and it looks super fucking cute. And I don't know, it's just a soft spot in my heart. That's just a cute little read that I like to pick up once in a while. So yeah, that comes in at number 29. Coming in at 28, I have The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. I think this is one that just is near and dear to me because it's kind of a Willy Wonka-esque story, and I absolutely love Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory ever since I was a little kid, so take that how you want. It's just an intriguing premise for me. So this story really quickly is about a woman named Lucy who, when she was younger, she really loved this series called the Clock Tower series, which everyone liked, kind of the equivalent to like Harry Potter. And unfortunately, the author has had this super, super long hiatus, but he comes back kind of like Willy Wonka and does this like competition where he invites a certain amount of people to his home and his island, and they have to compete, and the winner wins the new novel that's going to be worth a bunch of money. So Lucy actually is invited, and she's very determined to win this because she needs a bunch of money because she wants to adopt one of her students that she has a really close relationship with. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I loved it. I would reread this over and over again. It's just a cozy, comfy read to me. I know that it's not going to be for everyone, but this was exactly what I needed when I read it, and I'm sure that I'll return to it over and over again. Coming in at number 27, I have Mapping the Interior by Stephen Graham Jones. So this is the novella that I read this year that I really, really liked. It's a short read, but it packs a punch. It is about a 15-year-old native boy who happens to see this shadow at night in his house that reminds him of his late father who died mysteriously years ago. And he follows this figure, and then like the house is bigger than he imagined, and the journey just goes from there. I don't want to say anything else because it's very, very short, and I think that you should kind of go into it blind, but it's basically a story about grief and like the importance of knowing where you come from. I think the writing in this book was exceptional, which is funny because I talked about I was a teenage slasher before and I really did like the writing style, but it's for some reason worked in here for me. The Native American representation written on page was done so well in terms of like their dialogue, which isn't going to be for everyone, but I think that he's spot on with it. The ending was abrupt, but I mean, it's a novella, and I think that this is a book that I'll be thinking about for quite some time. All right, at number 26, I have The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill, which is a super cute little graphic novel that you can read in less than an hour, but it still hits you in the feels, and I had so much fun. It's pretty much about these little tea dragons, which are these little mythical creatures that are little dragons that grow these leaves on the top, and you can actually take those little flowers and make tea out of it that people really, really like, but it's kind of this dying art. And our main character, Greta, gets an internship with an individual to learn how to make this tea, and it's her journey of understanding how to make the tea and all of the friendships that she makes along the way, and it's so wholesome and cute. This is one that if I'm in a bad mood or anything, I would pick this up because it's just a warm hug. The friendships that are in here are so sweet. The drawings, just the atmosphere, everything about it is adorable. So I've only read the first one. I actually have the other two here from the library. I'm sure that I'm going to buy them eventually, but yeah, that one comes in at number 26 on my list. At number 25, I have When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen. This is a story, a pretty quick story, it's just a little over 200 pages, about our main character, Mira, who left her southern kind of racist hometown, but a long time ago, but is invited back because her childhood best friend, Celine, I believe her name is, invites her back for her wedding, but the wedding is gonna be held on a plantation in the South. So Mira ultimately goes, and as you can assume, this is a horror book. The ancestors aren't too excited about, you know, Celine and a white woman having a wedding on a place where so much destruction has happened. So yeah, this one was great. It was a fun time. It's just kind of middle of the road for me in terms of this list because there were so many other really, really good books, but I would recommend anyone picking this up. The only reason why it's a little further down at 25 is because I think the ending was pretty abrupt. I wish that it was a little bit longer, but like I said, I mean, this was like a 4-star read for me, so if you're intrigued, pick it up. It's totally worth it. All right, so number 24, I have What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I'm not going to say much about this because this is a retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Fall of the House of Usher. So I read that for a vlog. I'll have it linked up above. And then I picked this one up, and I think this retelling was done really, really well. That's all I want to say because it's very short. I would say read the original and then pick this up. This is my first T. Kingfisher book, and I really enjoyed it, so I'm excited to pick another one up. If you have a suggestion for me of where to start because she has a bunch of books, let me know. I also have the second book in this duology, What Feast at Night, that I have from the library that I need to get to very soon. For number 23, I have Night Watching by Tracy Sierra. So this is a thriller about a mother and her 2 kids and how they're trapped in this little tunnel under the stairs because there is an intruder that comes into their house, and the mom like forgets to grab important stuff and they're just in there being quiet, and events happen after that gets this big snowball going. And it's a cool book because it's told from the mom's perspective, and it just talks about like what she would do in that what you would do in that situation, and you can really feel the panic. It talks about like, does she know the intruder or not? Like, she kind of feels like she can remember who the voice is, and she's just kind of wrapping her brain around who it could be. But another fun aspect of this that I enjoy, but I understand that a lot of other people may not, is the unreliable narrator trope, because you don't know if the mom is like, if this is really happening or if this is just in her brain, because we only get her perspective in this book really at the beginning. And I don't know, it was super fun for me. I powered through this thing. There were a lot of twists and turns. Some things I did guess, but other things was really surprising for me. So yeah, I think it's a great read. I loved it. I gave it like 4.5 stars, but I know it's a polarizing read, but if that sounds interesting to you, definitely pick it up. For 22, we have the infamous Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I'm not going to go into detail about this book because this book has been everywhere for years now. Basically, it's dragon riders and a magical school, so like, what more do you need to pick it up? Honestly, this is probably one of the most surprising books of the year because I read it just because I wanted to know what the hype was about, and I did not expect to like it as much as I did. It's kind of cheesy, it's kind of unbelievable, but it was a book that I was engrossed with that I haven't really experienced with a book in a long, long time. However, I'm just gonna read Fourth Wing and leave it at that and have my love for it, and I'm not gonna pick up Iron Flame because I've just heard terrible things for that. So I'm just gonna keep this little piece of my heart that was surprising for me and leave it at that. Okay, so 20 and 21 we're gonna talk about together because coming in at number 20 is the entire Heartstopper series, which I loved, and then 21 is an extension of that called This Winter. So we'll start with Heartstopper. I read all 5 of them this year and absolutely love this story. I don't know anyone who wouldn't like this. It's a sweet story about Nick and Charlie and their budding love, and it goes from them kind of trying to understand their sexuality and what this relationship looks like to eventually being full-time partner and like being in college and dealing with a lot more adult issues. Alice Oseman just knows how to pull the heartstrings. She knows how to talk about serious themes in a way that's hard-hitting, but also, I don't want to say lighthearted because they're serious, but it just makes things really impactful. I don't know. It really just puts you into the world of these 2 love bugs in high school and just figuring out everything that everyone has to figure out during that time. That's anxiety-provoking, and it just feels like it's the end of the world. And then This Winter is a story about, it focuses more on Charlie and his family, like Tori from Solitaire and their little brother Oliver during the holidays. And he's actually separated from Nick during this time, and he's just like super depressed. And, you know, he forms a relationship kind of with his sister that he can kind of confide in with the things that he's feeling. And yeah, it's a little bit of a darker like themes and stuff, but overall it still ends lighthearted and like just a warm hug. I love Alice Oseman. These can do no wrong. Okay, time for the next section. We are going to talk about books 19 through 11, which are all great, phenomenal reads. I recommend them. They're all 4, 4.5, and some are even 5-star reads here. So grab a pen, let's get right into this section. At number 19, I have All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. Which was a shock because, unpopular opinion, I really didn't like Razorblade Tears that I read a year or so ago, but this was awesome. So this starts out with a bang. So this is a crime fiction novel, and I normally don't like crime fiction novels, but this one really worked for me. It starts out with a bang. This isn't a spoiler. It starts out the book this way, where there is a school shooting where a teacher is murdered by a former student. And Titus, our main character, who is the black sheriff in this Southern Virginia town, obviously there's some racism, has to deal with this murder, and and there's not a lot of murders in this town, you know, and he's just trying to figure out what to do with it and keep the peace as much as possible. And then obviously with figuring out why the student killed the teacher, there's a lot of secrets and like town history and stuff that becomes unraveled, and it's a really cool journey. Yeah, very surprising read for me. I am now interested in reading a couple more crime fictions because this is my first one. I didn't think that I would be interested in it, but I absolutely loved it. The ending I didn't suspect. Yeah, it was really good. There were a few plot holes, which is why it's a little bit lower at 19 on my list, but overall I recommend this book for sure. At number 18, I have Root Magic by Eden Royce, which is a middle grade story about twins named Jez and Jay, and their grandmother recently passed away, and they're trying to kind of deal with that. They're forming a relationship with their uncle, who decides that when they turn 11, they will learn the family root work and how to do root magic, and they learn this, and it's kind of talking about how they learn to do this root work, and ultimately there's something that they have that happens and they have to kind of protect their family. And it was super cute. I honestly learned a lot in this little middle grade about hoodoo and root work that I didn't know beforehand, and it's a really like unique take. I think that there should be more books that discuss these themes and like this lifestyle, I guess I should say, and I had a really good time. Yeah, I wasn't expecting a middle grade to be this high, but it is. It comes at number 18. At number 17, I have Long Way Down, the graphic novel by Jason Reynolds. So this is a graphic novel. He has a full novel that's called Long Way Down, but I started with the graphic novel. I just bought this online and thought that I was getting the novel, but I got the graphic novel, so I was like, screw it, I'll just read this. And I'm really glad that I did. I want to pick up the novel moving forward, but this is a story about a kid named Will, and his older brother is shot and killed, and it's him dealing with grief and the influences that his like neighborhood and like the hood rules have on his way of grappling with grief and, you know, kind of wanting revenge. That's all I'm gonna say about it because it's a very short read. Yeah, this was done really well. I loved the hood neighborhood like rules and expectations for specifically like little black boys and how they deal with grief and grapple with hard things that happen. Very moving. Like, even though it's a graphic novel, like I cried in this, and yeah, I think this is gonna stick with me for a really long time. Definitely pick this up, and I need to pick up the novel myself right away. At number 16, I have Pet by Okweke Emezi, and if you know anything about me, you know I love Okweke. And there's actually another book that's higher up on this list from them, and I just love them. But this is a young adult short. I don't think it's a novella, but it's pretty short. Like, oh, actually it is. It's under 200 pages. But anyway, the basic premise of this is that in the town called Lucille, there's supposed to be no more monsters. But Jam, the main character, cuts herself in her mom's studio, and this image of this creature comes to life, and this image tells Jam that they actually are going to go hunt a monster in Lucille, because there is one, and the twist is that the monster is actually at her best friend Redemption's house. So it's a journey about going to see why a monster's there, how they take care of it, if she can talk to Redemption about what's going on at the house, and yeah, that's all I want to say. This book hit. The monster, or the topic and main theme of this book, is so important for young adults, and it was done so well. Like, I wish I would have had this book when I was younger. Like I said, Okweke Emezi has a very unique writing style, a very unique take on real hard life events, but they do it so well. This is a great book. I need to pick up Bitter. I have it here, which is the sequel and the end of that duology, so I plan on picking that up in the next couple of months. Coming at number 15, I have the classic Carrie by Stephen King. So I decided this year that I want to read all of Stephen King's books in publication order. I didn't get as far as I wanted to. I started with this and I'm reading Salem's Lot right now. But anyway, everyone knows the story of Carrie, about a misunderstood high school girl named Carrie who is very much bullied in school, and she has this special like telekinetic power, and she basically gets the best kind of revenge on these bullies in high school. Yeah, this is my first time reading it. I've watched a lot of adaptations and all of the movies multiple times, but I'm glad that I read the original because it was really, really good. I liked the mixed media aspect of it. There are like interviews and like newspaper clippings and things like that in this book, but it was a fun time. Stephen King is exceptional. I'm excited to finish Salem's Lot, but if you haven't picked up Carrie yet, definitely pick it up. Number 14, I have Friday Black by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, which is a short story collection that focuses on the violence, injustice, and painful absurdities that Black men and women contend with every day in this country. That's the best way to wrap this up. If that's interesting to you, it's a quick read, but it packs a punch, like I've said for a lot of other things. I absolutely love this. Some of the short stories in here that I liked is the first one, The Finkelstein Five. There's one called Zimmerlin that's in here that's great, and also the one titled Friday Black. So this focuses on the Black experience in America, consumerism, abolition. This one hits a lot of topics, and I think that, if you're trying to understand the Black experience a bit, pick this one up. It's awesome. Coming in at 13, I have As Long as the Living Trees Grow by Zulfa Katau. I really should have looked this up, but this was great. This is a young adult contemporary novel about our main character, Salama, who in this book, the Syrian Revolution starts, and she is a pharmacy student, but she now is she wants to volunteer at the hospital to help in any way that she can with all of the injured people that are there. So she's doing that. She also lives with her sister-in-law, Layla, who's very, very pregnant, and she's grappling with the dangers of everyday life, but she's trying to decide if it's best for them to flee and try to have a better life elsewhere that's not in a war-torn country, or if she wants to stay and fight with the revolution. This is important. I think everybody should read this book, especially with what's going on right now. It was hard-hitting. I cried multiple times in this book. There were twists and turns that I was not expecting. There's a character in here, what's his name? One second. Cough, which is an imaginary character for the main character that's like an embodiment of their fear, and that was a cool take, kind of similar to like the book Thief, which is, that's death and this is fear, but just a cool take. This is gonna stay with me for a really long time. I think everyone should pick this book up. Number 12, I have Trust of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I don't want to say much about this because I feel like you should go into it blind, just like a lot of other Brandon Sanderson books. So basically our main character, Tress, for various reasons, has to go on a journey at sea to go save the love of her life. And that's all I want to say. This is very fairy tale-esque. There's humor in here, which I normally don't like humor in any of my books, but Brandon Sanderson did it really, really well. There were twists that I didn't expect. The way that Brandon Sanderson builds this whimsical world and talks about the story and the build-up for the climax is unmatched. He is the king of storytelling, honestly. This is also my first pirate story, and now I'm on the hunt. So if you know other pirate stories that are similar to this, leave them down below because I ate this up. All right, and at number 11, just missing the number 10 spot, but it's a great read, and that is Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. Another hard-hitting YA contemporary. I read several this year, and they have blown me away. So this one is about our main character, Donis, and she is a biracial young woman who is learning where she fits in because she's not enrolled on the reservation, the Ojibwe reservation, which her dad is part of, but her mom is not. So she lives with her mother off the reservation, but she can go and have events and like knows a lot of people on the reservation. And it's just her identifying with both sides and struggling with that. But ultimately, she witnesses a murder and gets involved in this investigation, and it kind of rocks her world more than she expects. And that's all I want to say. Fucking good. A page turner. I couldn't put this one down. There's romance in this that I absolutely adored. There were twists that I didn't expect. I think the explanation of being biracial and feeling like you don't fit in one place or the other was done exceptionally well. Yeah, pick this one up, please. As I keep saying with every book, but this was so good. Okay, we have made it to the top 10, and coming in at number 10, I have one of my new favorite authors, and that is Chain Gang All-Stars, and the author is Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, who also wrote Friday Black. Pick this book up, it's so good. So the premise of this book is that there is this dystopian world where prisoners have this for-profit program that they can enroll in that's basically this gladiator-style fight to the death, and they have to go through these ranks, and if they can beat everyone and get to the top, then they gain their freedom. And these gladiator fights are broadcasted and they make a lot of fucking money, kind of like the Super Bowl. And there's a romantic element in this book. It talks about ethics of like, you can actually imagine this like happening, to be honest, and like how ethically it's just so wrong. It talks about abolition, capitalism. A lot is packed into this book, and yeah, it's so good. It's so good. The only reason why it's number 10 is because I think that he tried to pack a lot into here, and I wanted a little bit more. Like, I just wish this book was longer, or I wish that there's a sequel. We'll see, but yeah, I'm hoping this turns into a movie because this was a page turner, and I was fully captivated with this read. So, number 10, Chain Gang All-Stars. At number 9, I have The Deep by River Solomon. I'm not going to say much because this is a very short book, but this book, phenomenal. So unique and so well done. Basically, it's about the main character, Yetu, which she is the keeper of memories for her people called the Wajinyu, which are these underwater creatures that were born because pregnant black slaves were thrown overboard and died when they were doing the transatlantic slave journey. And basically their embryos were able to survive, and they created this whole community underground. But Yetu's the only person who keeps these dark, deep memories for her people. That's all I want to say. So good. River Solomon, it's crazy that Sorrowland was so low because this one is literally number 9, and I will reread this forever. This is a book that I've only read once, but I know when you reread it, you're going to be catching things for a long, long time. There's another River Solomon book even higher on this list, so they have become one of my favorites. But yeah, another thing I want to say is that this was based off of or in collaboration with the song called The Deep by a band called Clipping. So definitely make sure you listen to that when you read this book. But yeah, I don't know how they did it, but this book was great. So please pick it up and chat with me in the comments about it. Coming in at number 8, I have Confessions of an Alleged Good Girl by Joya Goffney. Can you believe this is a YA like contemporary romance? I know, who am I? But this rocked my world. This is a book that I wish that I had when I was in high school. It's basically about our main character, Monique. Sorry, I had to look down. I couldn't remember. Monique, who is struggling with basically sex. She has this longtime boyfriend, and she's pretty much ready to have sex at this point, but she's struggling with it, and she has like this disorder that makes it very difficult. And she's actually a preacher's child, so she's also dealing with like the shame she feels from the church with wanting to have these sexual desires with someone that she cares about. I mean, it's not a love triangle, but she has multiple love interests, and it's just so good. The relationships and friendships in this book, I'm gonna remember for a long time. This is such a sex positive book that I think is so imperative for young adults to read. Like I said, I wish I would have had this when I was younger, but yeah, this is gonna stick with me for a long time. 5-star read. It's still sitting at number 8. We still have so many more good books to go. Coming in at number 7, I have Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. Another romance. Who knew? Quickly, it's about Yasmin and Josiah, who are co-parenting, and they've been co-parenting for a long time, and they do it really, really well. But ultimately, things happen, and this is a second chance romance that melted my heart. That's it. That's all I want to say about it. Pick it up. Please pick it up. It's so good. The relationship between them was so sweet, but yet spicy and realistic. The relationship she has with her friends, unmatched. It reminds me of my girlfriends back home. I flew through this. I don't know why I haven't picked up the second book. I own it. I don't know. I feel like I just am gonna eat it up and I just want to savor these books. And Kennedy Ryan's, the newest one in this story, comes out this year. So yeah, Kennedy Ryan, I love, 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 love this story. Would you believe that number 6 is also a romance book? I guess this is the year of Scotty finding what her romance style is, but number 6 is my favorite romance of the year, and that is Only for the Weak by Natasha Bishop. And I can't believe I don't have this physical copy. I was trying to find this cover and I cannot find it anywhere because it's a reprint, so I might have to go on Pango and pay a couple for some coins because I need this book. But ultimately the story is about Janelle, who is the best fucking sister ever because she goes on this destination like getaway with her sister because they're celebrating the fact that her sister's getting married, but her sister's getting married to her ex-boyfriend. So drama. But ultimately when we're there, she sparks this little connection with her ex-boyfriend's best friend named Rome. And they have this agreement that for the week, you know, they're gonna be hooking up and having fun, but does it last longer than just that week? This story is messy, it's fun, it's sexy. Rome is the best fictional character like ever that I've read of in terms of a romantic partner. It's so good. It's so short. That's the only negative thing about this book, is that I wanted more and more and more. So I'm definitely gonna be picking up other books by Natasha Bishop, but I'm gonna be rereading that one all the time. It's so good. All right. Top 5, and starting at number 5 is one of my favorite authors of all time, Akwaeke Emezi's Little Rot. I know this book is not going to be for everyone. This book is heavily focused on sex and corruption and drama, so I'm going to leave it at that. This book takes place in one weekend, which I thought was done really, really well. There's a lot of events that happen in this one weekend, and they're all connected, which was masterful for Akwaeke's writing. But it basically talks about like the corruption and secrets of like the underground Nigerian like sex world, basically. That's all I want to say. Like I said, it's not going to be for everyone, but if you're interested in that, pick it up and just go for the ride. I don't want to say much, but like look at all of these tabs that I have in there. I need to reread it, but this might be my favorite Emezi. I really like The Death of Vivek OG, but this might take the cake. So yeah, one of my favorites of the year at number 5, Little Rot. All right, at number 4, another new favorite author, which I was not expecting this year, but I was blown away by this book that definitely has made them one of my favorites now, and that is Model Home by River Solomon. So this is the 3rd book on this list, and like I said, Sorrowland started so low, and this one's in my top 5, but the premise of this is there are 3 sisters that have moved away from their childhood home. There were a lot of issues with the home because their parents are well-to-do and they live in this very nice, classy neighborhood where they're kind of like the only black family. And they had some issues, they all moved away, but they all have to come back to this house because their parents are found dead. And everyone assumes that there's like a murder-suicide that happened. But the 3 sisters know that there's always been some weird shit that has happened in this house, and they're going on a journey to figure out what the hell is actually happening and if this house is really haunted. River Solomon did their thing with this book. I don't know a book that has tackled the haunted house story the way that River Solomon did. You think that it's a haunted house story, which it very much is, but it's so much bigger than that. And I don't want to say anything else about it, but the themes in this book are exceptional. How generational trauma affects generations and how it's just perpetual is done so well. This book I'll be talking about for a really, really long time. This was the new release of River Solomon this year. It's obviously in my top 5, and I'll be picking up anything else by River Solomon, even though Sorrowland was so low down. Absolutely great, and this is also probably my favorite cover of the year. Just throwing that out there. All right, top 3. Number 3, I have Wild Enough, a middle grade book, and that is Amari and the Night Brothers. So quickly, the story is about Amari, and her older brother Quentin goes missing, and he's been missing for a while, but Amari is really frustrated because she feels like she's the only one who like gives a shit anymore. And one day she finds this ticking briefcase in Quentin's bedroom, and she opens it, and it's like directed specifically for her. She opens it, and there's this invitation to the Bureau of Supernatural Investigations, and she's whisked off to this wizard world, this crazy different world, and in terms of trying to find her brother, and yeah, that's all I want to say. But this book was so great. This book is the first book that I've read that has given me similar feelings to what I felt when I read Harry Potter. Like Harry Potter, I mean, I have a whole tattoo of the Deathly Hallows like a lot of people do. And I mean, it's kind of bittersweet now with the author, but Harry Potter will always have an insanely deep spot in my heart. But this is the first thing that made me ever feel like that, gave me those same feelings. And for that, it's number 3. I haven't even picked up the second book yet. I own it, but I honestly want to reread this before picking up the other one because I lose sense of time when I pick up this book. Like, I'm just so in this world with Amari like none other. So if you yourself want something similar to Harry Potter, pick this up. Buy this for any little nieces, nephew, kids that you have. I want this to be on everyone's shelves. It is so good. All right, number 2 is actually a reread for me, and that is Sula by Toni Morrison. Ultimately, this book is about Sula and Nell, who are absolute best friends, like thick as thieves, do everything together. And one day when they're older women, Sula, for reasons that you understand in the book, leaves, and then ultimately she comes back, but their relationship is kind of strained and events happen, and it's a classic for a reason. Toni Morrison is one of my all-time favorite authors. I'm trying to go through all of their works. I started with The Bluest Eye, then I read Sula, and I need to read Song of Solomon. That's my next one in chronological order. And yeah, this book packs so much in. I know that I could reread this book every year for the rest of my life, and I will probably still have new things that I pick up on, which is unheard of, and no one writes like Toni Morrison. Please pick it up. If you don't pick up Sula, pick up any of their works. I absolutely adore Toni Morrison, and it's a shame that they've passed because now it's a definitive amount of books that I have to read, and yeah, I'll always come back to Sula. Sula, just the character Sula will always live inside me. Okay, we have made it to my favorite book of the year, and it's pretty crazy because I don't even own this book yet, so I need to buy it, and that is The Reformatory by Tanana Reeve Dew. This story has been on my brain, I shit you not, since I read it in, I believe, February. I think about this book nonstop. The premise of this book is that our main character, or one of our main characters, Robbie, he's a 12-year-old boy, and he has this altercation with a kid his age for a justified reason, but this is in the Jim Crow South, and he has an altercation with this white boy, and his dad is a very powerful white man, and ultimately Robbie is sent to the Gracetown School for Boys, which is a reformatory. And if you know anything about reformatories, they're absolutely fucking awful. And while he's there, he experiences haints or like ghosts from other boys who have been there and died. But that's not the scary part of this horror story. The horror is the atrocities of the humans and the things that they do to these boys and have been doing to these boys at this reformatory school for a long time. The other main character, Gloria, is his older sister who's basically fighting and doing everything that she can to get him out of the situation. I'm leaving it at that. I know I said this for a lot of books, but pick this book up. The fact that this book was written because Tananarive realized that in her family history, one of her like great uncles actually was a boy at the Dozier School for Boys, which is a real reformatory school that he died there. And she learned and like did a lot of, and learned a lot about the history of that spot, which was reflected into this book, which makes it absolutely horrific. Yeah, that's all I can say about this. It was moving. I want everyone to read it so we can all talk about it. It was so good. Favorite book of the year. I can't wait to pick up more Tananarive books. Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. All right, y'all. Thanks for kicking it with me. It was really hard for me to rank all of these fiction books from worst to best, but I did it. Let me know any of your thoughts down below. Tell me what your worst and your best book was of 2024. I'm going to do a recap of some of my stats in a week or so look out for that video. As I said, I did the same thing with nonfiction books. That's linked below. But other than that, I hope you had a great year. Next time I see you, it'll be 2025. Peace. Bye.